Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. It's a beautiful day out there today in the Tampa Bay area. My name is Cassie McSherry. My husband and I own Assurity Title here in the Tampa Bay area, though we service the whole state of Florida. So we pride ourselves on being family focused. We like to treat our clients like we would want our family treated. And, you know, community focused as well. So uh, I was recently asked, actually, Jason, just yesterday, what makes your title company different than others? And I said there are a lot of great title, hundreds of title agents, title companies in this area. And I think our level of communication is key. That's like our mantra around here. I keep telling all my staff communication is key.
Yeah, it's
So
nice. It's nice not having to wait a day to get a response back from you guys. Yeah.
we do not. Our goal is within the business day, and especially like, we do refinance transactions with you. If we get a title request, we try to be timely in the response of when those, documents will be back to you on the lending side. We really try to reach out both in email communication and on the phone. We get on the phone, we answer the phone. I get a lot of compliments on that. So if I
Well,
miss
it's
a
night and
call,
day. Yeah, it's night and day difference with you guys, and like especially when I'm dealing with attorneys' offices. Like
oh,
we're
definitely.
licensed in other states, so like in Georgia
Right.
and North Carolina, it's all attorneys' offices. Getting the title work from them is like pulling teeth. And with you guys, like I send one request and like I know it's going to come. You know.
Yeah. It's
So
interesting
thank
because I just had a conversation with the seller down in Miami-Dade. We closed his transaction. We have an agent down there who represents buyers. So as you know, in that county down south, buyers pick and pay title insurance. And when an attorney is representing the seller, we don't have any communication. We speak just to the attorney's office, which is typically a paralegal that we're interacting with. And then, but we insist, our company insists that we speak directly to the seller on the day of closing so that we can verify the wire instructions that they've provided to their attorney. And so I just had a conversation with a gentleman a couple of weeks ago, and he was so frustrated with me and upset with me, saying that he hadn't heard from us. And now I'm calling him on the last day of closing. And I had to explain to him how the process is. And he said, well, I didn't hear from the attorney the whole time. And I said, well, sir, I can't help you with that part. But we do pride ourselves on communication. We're really thrilled that people are so pleased with our service that they report that in the Google reviews. So we're our team works really hard to keep everybody informed. And I think even if the communication is not what the client wants to hear, a delay or whatever, just knowing and not avoiding the tough conversations is so important in our industry.
Awesome. You had some awesome topics that you put into the email yesterday back to Gabriella. Was that
Yes.
topics that you are going to try to hit on today or like over the next
I
several?
whatever you guys wanted to talk about, those were specific to things that have risen up recently. And I'd like to lead with the survey situation because and it's important for buyers agents to understand why a survey is needed for closing. Now, some buyers agents, some listing agents always like tell their client they have to have one, right? I have one agent that always tries to get their client to buy a new survey, the buyer. That's her position. She wants something fresh that's certified directly to her client. And, that's how she guides them, which is fine. From a title standpoint, from the lending side, Sean, right? Like some lenders want a copy of the survey, and some lenders require that the survey be within a certain timeline.
Oh, really?
Title,
I didn't.
yes,
Because we only care if you guys are good with it, we're good with it.
right. So, and then some lenders will say to their client, to their agent, um, lending doesn't need a survey. And that's true. Lenders don't need the survey. Lenders need the survey endorsement to their title insurance policy.
Exactly.
So in a finance transaction, there's the owner's title policy, and that protects the owner, the new home buyer. And then there's the lender's title policy, and endorsements are things that attach to that policy to give the lender further protection. One of those is called a Florida Form 9 endorsement, commonly known as a survey endorsement. In order for title, my office, to provide that endorsement to the title policy, we must have a survey. And so I had a very heated conversation with a buyer last week who said, my lender says they don't need a survey. Why are you making me spend $500 for a survey? And he was very heated about it. And so I think it's important and of course, the buyer's agent was upset too, because it's not that we're trying to charge anything, but in order to provide that endorsement that the lender does require, we need the survey from the title standpoint. And the things we're looking at on the survey are easements that need to be recorded, so electrical easements or whatever that may be. Um, Encroachments to make sure that there aren't, and we see them often. We see them, where maybe they live on a lake and the neighbor's dock is encroaching on their side of the property at the lake. That's something that we need to know from the title standpoint. And oftentimes, my underwriter, we're in the business of closing transactions, and we're not trying to cause any, you know, to crush a deal by any means. And a lot of times, my underwriter would provide what we call an exception for the lender's title policy. In other words, we're giving a clear Florida Form 9 to the lender. If anything arises with this doc in the example I'm giving, the lender is covered, but the owner would have to take it as an exception to their owner's title policy.
So
Okay.
how old of a survey will you allow? Because some title companies they'll say 10 years, some say
Yeah.
5 years, some say 3 years. This one down in Miami said 1 year on this survey, and my buyer wanted to use the sellers, and it was like 2 years old. And then come to find out, I believe the title company was affiliated with the survey company, so they were saying they needed a new survey because they made more money with getting a new survey.
And I think that's what, in the situation I was talking about from last week, I think that's what he was implying, that we had a personal relationship with the survey company and that's why we were pushing for it. That's not the case with us. And I'll tell you, every title company, every lender, every underwriter on the title side has their own processes. So I can't speak to that. What I can tell you is that from the Assurity Title side, every time we get a seller's existing survey, they have a survey, they're going to sign an affidavit at closing stating that it still reflects the property as it is in today's state. They're going to attest to that. And they could be held accountable for perjury if they input a pool or something and it's not reflective, because as we look at things from like Google Maps and stuff, but we're not on the property as a title agent, so we take a lot of what these affidavits we take that people are telling us the truth, and we verify it with agents and that sort of thing. But we submit that survey to our underwriter, who looks at it even more deeply than maybe the agents would. They're making sure that all the easements and everything are correct. I'm going to give you an example of a property that was closing up near Keystone. This property was it was on a big piece of land, but there was a huge Tico easement that ran through it. And it was about 10 feet wide, and it was running right underneath those electrical, you can't miss them. They're those, I don't know even what they call them, but the buyers were wanting to build on that property behind. In their mind, it's their property. It's all, you know. Well, really, that is an easement that belongs to Tico. And while it is in your backyard and you can use it, I have an easement running in my backyard. I can't build anything on it. If I did choose to build something on it, Tico has the right to come and tell me I need to have it removed, if that
Okay.
makes sense. So the buyers were furious in that situation because they said no one had told them. So it is important for agents to understand. And if you haven't had a training on surveys, because there are provided often, typically through the associations and stuff, our office is partnered with people to do that before too. You need to understand what easements mean if you don't. And clearly that buyer's agent in that situation did not. So our title policy is not going to protect the owner in that situation if they're going to build something, let's imagine something was already built there on top of that easement. That's happened too. People will put in a shed on a concrete slab or something. That is an encroachment into
How,
that easement.
so just real quick. So how old could a survey be?
We do not care as
Okay.
long as my underwriter approves it. So my office, I follow what my underwriter says.
Is
I
there a
give it to
general
them.
with them?
We
Three,
had
5 years?
one just approved that was from 1998.
Okay. All right.
It was new construction in 1998. It was built. It was still in the same. It was the same owner that had owned it since then.
Gotcha.
Nothing had changed, and my underwriter approved for us to use that. Though I have had lenders who will say the survey has to be 10 years or less. I've
Okay.
never heard 2 years. I've never heard 5 years, but I have heard 10 years or less.
Okay. Now going back to what you were saying. So how is the average buyer, average or buyers, just normal buyer's agent, or even seller for that matter, like uh, able to know that there is a utility easement that they couldn't build on from Tico? Because like I don't know on my houses that I've owned if there's any. It's not like I'm memorizing the survey or really paying attention to what the title company's telling me at
Right.
closing, right?
Yeah. It's going to show it on the survey. The survey is going to have, and you see them often, they're like 10 feet. Easements are often, driveways always cross into utility easements. A lot of people put their yard, there's an easement in my backyard. I put it, if I run a fence through that, is it horrible? No. Could I be asked to remove it? Absolutely. Like there's a guy 4 houses down. The easement runs all through the back of our properties. He has a fence up. It's small to keep his dogs in the yard. You're like weighing what's a big deal in your life, whether you care, is it a big deal if you have to remove a little fence? For some people, it is. We've had new construction homes that have gone into easements where they built out a little too far, and their back lanai crosses into a utility easement. That's an exception that you're going to take to the policy. Will Tico come and tell you, or will the water company come and tell you that you need to remove it? It's kind of a gamble in that case. Uh, but from a title standpoint, back to my original, we need to have that survey in order to make sure from a title standpoint and insurance standpoint, because we're insuring the lender and the owner, that there's not a title related issue. Encroachments can be, So what my underwriter is doing, let's go back to that 1998, right? There could be new easements or something that's recorded on the records since that 1998 survey was done. Maybe something
Okay.
changed legally in the public records and there's something to be concerned with or considered. That's what my underwriter is looking for when they're looking at the survey.
So
They're
they'll figure
less.
that out.
Yes, and we figure that out from the title side and your clients. And so the seller may not know. That's a legitimate, the seller is required to give certain disclosures, of course, about the property. But maybe, I mean, I know I'm not paying attention to the public record of everything that's, recorded or something.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some sort of notification to the homeowners, but we could miss that, you know. Um, but that was my point on the survey, is because this last situation I just had, they were so passionate about it that I was trying to force them to get a survey they didn't need, which wasn't the case.
Gotcha.
And the
And then
lender sometimes doesn't even want to see the survey. We send the survey and the invoice to sometimes as you know, the lender is just concerned with what invoices are being paid on their buyer side of the closing disclosure.
there's
That's
standard verbiage in the contracts regarding easements, like correct. But would you say that the average title company is going to be going over the survey and the easements with the buyer? Is that something that you're required to do?
so we have to submit. So regardless of whether we're using an existing survey or a brand new survey, we have to provide that to the agent as the representative for their buyer and the buyer.
At what
Then
point?
when we receive it and it's approved. So they get that before closing for them to review. At the closing table, there's a document that, notice to buyer is what it's called in our office and most title companies. Attorneys sometimes have different verbiage on there, but you have to acknowledge that you've reviewed the survey, and we write any encroachments that are listed on the survey. Okay. So we have to write that, and we write it in capital letters right there. There's no denying that it's there. It's written in capital letters on the survey too. And it's typically, so if there's something of concern, let's say the shed built on something, we get on the phone with the client at that point, the buyer, and explain what that encroachment is. And we explain that that's something that will be an exception to their title policy. Driveways, fences, we're less concerned about. We let them know. And a lot of times the surveyors too, because surveyors do not determine ownership. They're just trying to record a property based as it looks. So they don't determine who owns the fence or any of that. And a lot of times what we see is that the fence is near the borderline. The fence encroaches, a foot or something, or even down to like 3 inches. I mean, we've seen where it's just minimal encroachment. They're less concerned. And so the buyer has to make an informed decision at that point. Is this something that you're concerned about? Does this need to be remedied before closing? And you're accepting, if you're going to closing, then you're accepting that whatever this is will be an exception to the owner's title policy. And yes, it's explained in that, like at every closing, I'm saying this is not a title concern. If your fence or your dock is in somebody else's yard, that's a problem, later on. And you got to think insurance, you got to think all those other aspects, right?
So on one of our files now, so if, uh, one of my clients is purchasing a house. I think it's on like, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 acres of land, single family home. So
Okay.
survey is going to be very expensive.
Yes.
And the title company emails us the seller's prior survey. Hey, we've received the prior survey from the seller. However, we will need to put a survey exception on the title policy if we use this for closing. We don't see anything on the survey notating the screen porch. Please advise if you accept the survey exception on title.
Lenders,
So,
lenders will never accept a title exception.
okay, so I responded. I was like, I said, thank you for sending it over. Please email us the verbiage on the survey exception on title to confirm if our underwriter is okay with it. I know we typically don't allow for exceptions on title. However, I'll ask to see if we could save the buyer some money. So they don't end up sending that verbiage over. They just said, okay, porch is shown circled in second screenshot, smaller gray areas AC unit, just not detailed on survey. And then they responded, our underwriter deemed it prior survey acceptable. We will remove the survey exceptions with it. And
So in that case, you're talking about another title company.
yeah,
And that's so a title company or an underwriter for a title company has the option to make an exception for the lender. We see that often.
okay,
Okay. But it is not an exception on the owner's title policy. In other words, the insurance policy that protects that new buyer, that is an exception on their policy. They're not going
so
to protect. So if the buyer, I don't know, in that situation, I can't imagine. It's typically when a structure is already there and it encroaches into something else, right? An easement or something. The person with the easement could say, you've got to move that. Then it would fall on the buyer, and the title policy would not protect the buyer on that
okay,
scenario because it was an exception. But yes, underwriters for title companies have the option to make exceptions for lenders. And that happens a lot.
do
It
any
happens a great
agents
deal.
do any agents on the call have any questions on this topic?
Said that the title company can make the exception for the lender, but it ends up being an issue for the buyer, right? Because it's an exception on the insurance, right? Is that what you're saying?
So I'm speaking to title insurance, not homeowners insurance.
Okay,
Okay,
got
so
it.
that's
Okay,
important too.
okay,
So the title insurance policy is where it will be an exception.
okay.
So, yeah. If you
So
think about homeowners insurance being something that protects the structure itself and the
right.
personal project from anything in the future, title insurance protects anything from behind, that happened in the past. And so, from the point that the buyer buys this property, that screen lanai that he was talking about, that was something that was installed in the past that is not reflected on the survey that they currently have. So any structures, what they can deem permanent, even semi-permanent, like I'm talking about a shed with a concrete slab, could that be removed? Yes, but it's considered, fences. Can they be removed? Yes, but they have to be reflected on the survey. They're structures that have been installed that it would take money and effort to get those removed. Kind of different than a fire pit well, even fire pits. I mean, some of these fire pits too that run gas lines from that all needs to be reflected on a survey. Um, Docks, those are important too, like that are coming out. And it's interesting because a lot of these docks on a lot of these surveys, it's almost like the neighbors put their docks kind of together. I'm sure you guys have seen that,
Yes.
like and they're together. And so when, we see minimal, but I mean, it was interesting because we were dealing with a property up north in Chiefland, and the neighbor's dock was clearly encroached in their yard. They had paid cash for the transaction. They were looking to refinance. Well, it became an issue on the refinance side. The lender is like, what do you mean this guy's, they were like, oh, we're friendly with the neighbor. It's no big deal. Well, that's great, but I mean, and his dock encroached by like 5 feet into the property. She couldn't refinance that transaction. The lender's like, and the title company, and our problem was too that it was because we couldn't do it. It was going to be an exception to any title policy because it had encroached so much. There was like electric going down because they had the boat lift and it had to be moved. Now, how they ended up fixing that situation was they sold the neighbor that part of the land. So they actually, instead of having him move his dock, he bought into the 5 feet by whatever portion
Inter-
of their land. And
Interesting.
now, yeah. So and then, then we could do the refinancing. But that's a whole process too,
So
to
they
go
needed
through
to
that.
basically like reparcel, like
Yes.
reshape the
Yes.
parcel or
Yep.
whatever it's called.
Yep.
Well, like on our last house that we owned in Citrus Park, the neighbor beside us, people we bought it from, were the son and daughter-in-law of our neighbors. So basically, son and his wife lived there, and his parents lived right beside him. And they had a shared gazebo. It was a single-family home in Citrus Park. We had a shared gazebo with a walkway in between our properties. Now that gazebo was part on mine and part on theirs. So what makes it an exception on title? Well, that didn't have any electric going to it. It was just, I mean, I guess technically you could move the gazebo. I mean, you could.
Right.
So what makes it would that be an exception on your title policy? Because we were able to close in and it wasn't an exception.
Not for the lender, but I would be shocked if it wasn't, if you look at your title policy, it would have probably been an exception to the owner. I
Okay.
would be, if it wasn't, I would almost say that that was missed.
So that other one was an exception on the lender's policy because it was like, not only was it encroaching, you're saying it had electric and
Yes, it was so, yeah, there was no way to make it. There were so many things that could become an issue later, right? I mean, they had run power. There was a lot of encroaching that had happened on that
okay.
person's property. So, and when you're talking about a big dock, and I mean, and the amount of space, it went in like 5 feet down, like, because you own part of the land it was like 5 by 10 feet or 12 feet. I can't remember all the details, but that was how they resolved that, was they just parceled out and sold that to the neighbor.
So I'm sure that took a little while.
Yes, that takes time. And I'm not sure the process of that, truthfully. Some people, we've had where, like in Plant City, it's funny, there's a lot of alleys in Plant City that were and you have to go through a process through the courts to get them vacated so that they're part of the land now. It's interesting. And you see a lot of things too when family members are involved. And I mean this, and I love my family, but sometimes what between a family member isn't an issue, that when you go to sell it, it becomes an issue for the next buyer, you know? And we see a lot of like defective deeds and that sort of thing when it's family passing on to family. There's typically, if they do it themselves and they don't have, legal, because anyone can do a quitclaim deed, right? Anybody.
Yeah.
And record it in the public record. It doesn't make it an effective quitclaim deed though. It has to be, and homestead is a big issue when it comes to that sort of thing. Whether all parties who had rights to the property, if it was a homestead property.
Yeah, Cena just said that we need a survey class. So
If you guys are interested, I will work to pull that together. And here's the other thing I was going to say too. Yes, larger parcels of property are, I mean, some of these surveys were like, holy schmoly. My office does quote those out though. So we have a couple that we use up pretty standard that are just, quick lot and block ones. And then we have some, I think Terminus is the name of one who's like a family owned based out of Land O'Lakes. When we need really big properties, they're much more cost effective. It just depends on but we try to shop that out for our clients. It is something that a buyer can shop.
Yeah. I mean, like, because sometimes I'll see like the 6 foot by 6 foot surveys, like that
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
will, or maybe they're not that big, but
No, they're like,
okay.
seriously, like 5 feet by
Yeah.
6 feet. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, they're bigger than my desk.
Yeah. So that's not a normal like
No.
subdivision house.
No.
Okay.
No, but you have to deal with that if you're living somewhere that has acreage, farming. Typically in those big lots where you can have chickens and horses, you're going to pay a prettier penny for a survey living up there.
I think
See that survey that you helped me with for my pool? We found that we have an easement in our backyard of 7.5 feet. We had no idea we had. So our pool ended up being a lot smaller than we were anticipating, which was a surprise to us. But we did have to get like a special exception from the city of Dunedin to even be able to get pavers on that easement.
And that's a good point. So you have to keep in mind too that so Pinellas County specifically, every municipality is like an HOA there. If you think about it, right? So you have to, so what might work in Dunedin may be different in Hillsborough or, the city of Tampa, whether you're living in the county or the city, and those municipalities, some of those fines that you get, man,
Oh yeah, I
you
had to
want to
go
make
through the
sure,
engineer. Yeah.
yes,
So don't just go and lay your own pavers is what.
No, yeah, I had to
exactly.
like go through the engineer and like get like special, like I had to go through like a special request and then it was a nightmare. I'm still like, we haven't even gotten started on our project yet. It's been a real nightmare.
I say always make friends with your county officials.
I mean, they've been nice. It's just taken a long time and it's all
Oh,
because
yeah.
of that easement. It's all the easement.
Yeah.
I think Esther has a question.
Okay, so my question is in terms of the title commitment that is usually shared with us and our client, are we responsible for explaining to them the exceptions on the commitment, or can we point them to you guys to better understand it?
I would encourage you to point them to the title company.
Okay.
Because a lot of times now, I'm not saying that buyer's agents and listing agents shouldn't understand the commitment and have a working knowledge of it. But a lot of times in that Schedule B, which are the exceptions,
Right.
there's a lot of, and you can request too from your title company, the documentation, the supporting documents that lead to all those exceptions. But it's typically easier, for the title company to do it. and
I
kind
wouldn't
of.
think that the average, I wouldn't think that I don't think you would normally even send the title work to the buyer's agent, right?
No,
Normally?
Yes, they do.
the title commitment by contract is due to the buyer or their representative
Oh,
Right,
within like 5 days. And a
right.
lot of times, sometimes there's variations there, but typically within 5 days. My office works pretty quick and we have the title commitment out. We try to have it out by 3. Um,
you send it to
but
the buyer and buyer's agent or
we
just,
send it to the listing and the buyer's agent. And it's interesting that you say that. We just started having a conversation. Dominic just went through title agent school, and the idea on that has shifted a little bit, that it should go directly to the client. When I went to title agent school, it was you're sharing all this information with the realtors if they're involved, because they're the hired
Correct.
representatives of, and a lot of times the buyers don't know, but industry wise, it's changed a little bit, that the title commitment, lien search, estoppels should be going directly to the purchaser themselves. So we're shifting our processes too. Um,
is that going to be confusing for a buyer to be looking at a title
it is.
policy?
Well, what happens with our commitment too, so when we send it out to the agents even, our processor will send it out and then we'll bring attention to anything that's of a title concern, right?
Okay.
In the requirements. So we'll say, sometimes we're seeing a lot of claim of liens, right? People who've had work done from the hurricanes and that sort of thing, and a contract, and then we kind of guide them on what our process is in getting that fixed, or how we're going to work through that. The title commitment does go to the seller, because the title commitment in the requirement part really is all related to the seller. Any mortgages you have, judgments you have, if we need a continuous marriage affidavit, if we needed an affidavit that you've never, filed bankruptcy. So it's really personal. Those requirement parts, which are in Schedule B1, those really pertain to anything that's reporting on the property in the seller's name.
So would that go to the
Gotcha.
buyer for them to see that?
It's all public record, and it does, yes, yes, because
Okay.
the buyer has to be disclosed to anything that's attached to that has the right to know anything that's attached. So, and I get calls from, buyers agents often. It's the agent who will call me and be really nervous. Oh my gosh, there's a federal tax lien and all of that. And I just assure them that that's our job as the title company to take care of all of that. That's our job, to clear all of that before that buyer takes ownership. And our policy will protect them, you know.
Interesting. I know
So,
you
Awesome.
send us the title policy, and like, but just being honest, I don't really ever have a need to look at the title policy. Like, I mean, our underwriter looks at it, but like,
mhm,
I don't personally ever like go in and review it myself.
right. Um, I mean, if you're representing, this is another point I want to point out. If you're representing investors, this is important, because if there's a lien or a judgment placed on an investor, it can attach to multiple properties. Okay.
Okay.
That's really important to know, because it may have nothing to do with the property that you're selling or buying from him, but certain liens can. And so we can get sometimes partial lien releases. But it depends on what we see it often in Pinellas County, truthfully. Tarpon Springs, don't upset them. Make sure you pay your code enforcement fines over there, because it'll attach to every property you own.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
yeah, from an investment side.
Right.
Homestead properties are protected from certain kind of creditors, and not code enforcement. Those pretty, it just depends. It's hard because every situation is kind of different, but um, it, I mean, I do think it's important for agents to understand like the standard requirements and all of that. And then if your buyer is asking you about exceptions and stuff, do a 3-way call with your title agent who can answer the questions and pull the documentation and kind of guide you both through it. I wouldn't just say call the title company, be an expert with them, learn something new while you're on the way, but a lot of those things, there are a lot of things from back years and years ago, that are just going to be, now our standard exceptions up at the top, we can get rid of when we make sure that all contractors have been paid the first like 3 or 4. Maybe we should do a commitment class too. I could do that. And kind of go over that. But a lot of the standard exceptions of the exceptions, the top 3 or 4 are standard, and we can get rid of those when we make sure everyone's paid, make sure that we have a survey that reflects the property, those kinds of things.
I think that would be awesome to do a commitment class and like a survey class. I mean, you kind of give us, the highlights right here.
Yeah.
But like, because the agents get questions from the buyers on like what their lender's doing. Because I get calls from, my buyer's agents all the time. Hey, by the way, the buyer's calling me, and like, and I'm sure there's way more phone calls that they get that they don't even tell us about, Yeah.
Right.
And so, yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, because I had no
Yes.
idea that the title commitment went to them. 23
Well,
million. I
and
didn't know that.
I think it's important too that you have conversations with your title partner, whoever that is, and make sure that they're communicating with you as well. Like if we see something pop up that's an issue, we're on the phone with our agents right away. And we let them know we're working to get this cleared, but this is what needs to happen and this is the issue. And because the last thing you want is to be a week from closing, then all of a sudden title hasn't been able to clear something.
Right.
We always say title does not delay closings. So if something pops up on title and it can't be, we let everybody know this is an issue. It's going to take longer than the 21 days that you want to close, whatever that might be. Like, for example, when I said we were vacating an alley in Plant City, that took a court decision, and that closing got postponed for like 8 months. But you want to know about it right away, right? And we didn't know about it until we got the survey. So we had to do and another thing I will say too,
And that's usually at the end.
Right. Well,
Oh, my
we
word.
order surveys at the point that the lender says the appraisal is good.
Okay.
So if your lending team orders appraisals really late, like some people, I'm like, wait, we're closing next week. You haven't ordered the appraisal? It makes me nervous. I don't
That's
know how you
crazy when
guys.
I hear stories like that.
I mean, I get nervous, and I don't know how the ins and outs of the lending side, but I'm like, wait, we don't even know that this property is of value, So I get nervous about that, and that happens a lot. So we will make an executive decision sometimes. We like to have the survey 10 days before closing, is a week before closing. Or sometimes, they'll say we want to close on October 3rd, which was the situation. And then they're like, no, we're going to close on September 22nd, And I'm like, wait, did we even get the appraisal? So there are things on our side that there's a certain timing, but you don't want to be ordering surveys and then the property doesn't appraise and now they're getting out of the contract and now we're holding a survey,
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks for the
Because
feedback,
yes,
Cassie.
you are so welcome.
I do have another question. I do have another quick question here. In terms of what you just mentioned about the ordering the survey, what's usually the turnaround time once it's ordered?
So the two that we use for our standard lot and block, they can get them to me within 5 days. If I
Okay,
call
cool.
them, now keep in mind weather, right? Lightning, summer sometimes gets tricky. But we can usually have it, like we in that one situation where they said they wanted to close on Monday. And it's so funny because we jumped into action. We got on with our survey company. We got the 2 quotes. And we said we need it by Friday because they want to close on Monday. And they got it to us yesterday, actually. And then they're like, no, we're going to keep the regular contract date of October 8th. I'm like, all right, well, we got the survey.
That was
And
smart.
then,
That was clever.
and then we just tell Target, because Target was our surveyor on that one. We're like, just kidding. We'll pay you in October.
All right. Thanks a lot, Cassie. I
You're
appreciate the
so
feedback.
welcome.
Yeah.
It seems like I'm sorry. It just seems like we really need to have understanding of that survey, even as listing agents. If you're saying there's easements that could be under a property and the seller is unaware of it, we want to set them up for success. We can't be marketing their property, then the buyer comes and there's all these delays or they cancel the contract because there's an easement that we weren't aware of. So if you can do that survey class, that would be great.
Yes.
Thank you so
Sean,
much.
Sean, let's get together. I'll give you a call and we'll get something on the calendar.
We'll get that out for you, and we'll give you all the detail when that comes up here in the next, hopefully 30 days.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you so
perfect.
much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate
good
it.
day.
Thank you all.